It was summer, the first one since I started high school. I was 17 years old, and like many teenagers, I was desperate for money. I needed to boost my college fund, and without a job, the possibility of not being able to go was becoming more real by the day. That's how I ended up on the night shift at a McDonald's, a bit out of town. The place seemed perfect, not too busy, which meant I could even sneak in some extra sleep while making money. The McDonald's wasn't exactly welcoming. The exterior had mold stains, and the place felt isolated. But in my mind, that just meant less work. When I arrived for my first shift, I was greeted by a middle-aged man who looked tired and overburdened. He gave me a quick tour of the building, explaining the basics, how to handle the fryers, the ice cream machines, the soda dispensers. Everything seemed straightforward until he suddenly stopped, took a deep breath, and asked me, "Do you believe in ghosts?" I was intrigued. "No, but why do you ask?" He hesitated before responding. "I'm going to sound crazy, but there are some rules you need to follow while working here. I know they sound ridiculous, but they could save your life." I laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke. "Rules? What do you mean? Has anyone ever gotten hurt here?" He didn't laugh. Instead, he pulled out his phone and showed me photos of teenagers who had worked there. They all disappeared, he told me, after ignoring the rules. "The police don't believe me," he said, his voice trembling. "They think I'm crazy. But please, take these rules seriously." He handed me a piece of paper. Reluctantly, I opened it and began to read. Rules for surviving a night at McDonald's *. 1. Keep the drive-through counter lights on at all times. A creature lurks outside, waiting for the lights to go out so it can attack. 2. Check the security cameras before taking an order. If a black Range Rover Evoque with dark tinted windows appears at the drive-thru, don't say a word. Ignore the driver's voice, no matter how threatening it sounds. If you respond, it will come inside and attack like a beast. 3. Never make fries at midnight. The smell will attract something you don't want to meet. 4. If you hear your name being called from behind, immediately lie down and close your eyes. You might feel claws or teeth brushing against your skin, but don't move. It will disappear after a demonic laugh. 5. If you see a girl with no eyes standing in the parking lot, turn off all the lights and lock the doors. Wait until the sounds of screaming and roaring outside stop before turning the lights back on. 6. If you hear voices in the dining area, ignore them. There's no one there. It's another distraction from the creature. 7. If the lights go out on their own, cut off a toe or a finger, place it on the drive-through counter and hide. If the finger disappears, you're safe. If it's still there, pray for a quick death. 8. Don't fall asleep. If you do, you might miss one of the vital signs that something is nearby, whether it's the sound of your name being called, distant laughter, or deadly silence. I was stunned. "This is a joke, right?" I asked, but he didn't answer. He just looked at me with eyes full of desperation and walked away. I stood there, reading and rereading the list. Deep down, I wanted to believe it was a prank, but something told me it wasn't worth taking the risk. The first hour of the night, nothing happened. No customers, no strange sounds. I began to relax, thinking maybe it was all just a joke. But then, something on the camera caught my attention. A little girl was lurking behind a bush in the parking lot. She had no eyes, just empty sockets. A chill ran down my spine. I almost forgot to turn off the lights, but I quickly hid behind the counter, following Rule 5. I heard something heavy slam against the side of the booth, as if something was trying to get in. Then came the screams, high-pitched, maddening screams of a child. I covered my ears, but the screams pierced through my mind. When they finally stopped, the silence was filled with low growls and the sound of flesh being torn apart. I threw up on the floor. After pulling myself together, I turned the lights back on. I was shaking, but I knew I had to keep going. And then, I heard voices, laughter and conversations coming from the dining area. I almost went to check, but I remembered Rule 6. I put on my headphones and tried to ignore it, focusing on my homework. When a customer finally showed up, I felt relieved. At least there was someone there, something normal. But my relief quickly turned to fear when I saw the next car at the drive-thru. A black Range Rover with dark tinted windows. The driver yelled at me, insulted me, demanded a response. I didn't say anything. After 10 minutes, he drove away. I worked the night shift at an old hotel in town. My hours were from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., and it was usually a quiet job, especially after a hurricane devastated much of the city. Many residents were forced to abandon their homes, and over time, the hotel, which was already simple and somewhat isolated, started to empty out. Only a few guests remained. Almost all of the rooms were vacant. It was as if the hotel, once a place of life and activity, was becoming a forgotten place, filled with echoes and shadows. On one of those lonely nights, he appeared, a man, tall, with broad shoulders, but what caught my attention the most were his eyes. There was something wrong with them, as if they were empty. He walked into the lobby asking for towels. His request wasn't strange in itself, but there was something about his behavior that made me uncomfortable. He seemed agitated, like he was looking for something with his eyes, but didn't know what it was. When I handed him the towels, he grabbed them tightly, as if they were his only salvation. But the way he walked away, slowly and always looking back, put me on edge. I couldn't stop thinking about him. So I checked the security cameras. There he was in the hallway, doing something that sent chills down my spine. He was rubbing the towels on his face, as if he was trying to absorb something from them, maybe a scent, a memory. It was disturbing. It didn't take long for the man to return to the lobby. This time, he seemed even more strange. He told me that his room key wasn't working, but when he mentioned the room number, something didn't add up. In the hotel, the rooms only had numbers, but he insisted that his had a letter. I tried to explain, but he didn't seem to hear me. Suddenly, he moved closer to the reception window, so close that I could see every detail of his face. The sweat dripping, his eyes now locked on mine, unblinking. Then, he whispered something that froze me to the core. "I'm going to kill you." He left the hotel right after that, but the terror his words left behind lingered in every corner of the building. Every shadow seemed deeper, every sound more threatening. The time until the end of my shift seemed to drag on, and when I finally finished, it was already past 2 a.m. The silence of the hurricane-ravaged city hung heavy in the air, and all I wanted was to get home. But fate had other plans. As I walked through the dark, deserted streets, I heard footsteps behind me. They weren't ordinary footsteps. They were fast, almost eager, but quiet, as if whoever it was didn't want to be noticed. My heart raced. I knew who it was before I even turned around. And there he was, the man from the hotel, following me, with that unsettling smile and eyes that seemed to reflect something inhuman. His voice echoed in the night, cold as the wind that blew. "I'm going to kill you." I tried to run, but my legs felt like lead. Fear consumed me. Before I could react, I felt his cold hands around my neck. He squeezed tightly, cutting off my air, and I felt like my life was hanging by a thread. In the midst of my desperation, I tried to scream, but barely any sound came out. Then suddenly, a door swung open. A man shouted from across the street. The attacker hesitated, released me, and disappeared into the darkness, like a ghost dissolving into the shadows. I was saved, but I was never the same. To this day, whenever I walk alone at night, I feel as though he's still there, watching, waiting for the right moment to finish what he started. Working the night shift at a hardware store had its perks. It was a quiet environment, and with few people around, time seemed to pass slowly, which sometimes made the work feel lonely. But that changed when Nicole started working with me. She was a shy and incredibly kind person, someone who made those long hours more bearable. Her beauty didn't go unnoticed by customers either. While some were just friendly, others crossed the line, making her uncomfortable. One day, Nicole mentioned a customer who had scared her. He flirted in a way that was different from the others. Something about him left her feeling uneasy. I tried to reassure her, saying he probably wouldn't come back. Little did I know that story was just beginning. A few days later, the same man returned to the store. Nicole was busy in another section, so he came to talk to me. Something about him was off, an unsettling persistence. He confidently claimed that he was there to pick up Nicole, as if they had arranged something. When I told him she had already left, his mood shifted drastically. Trying to avoid an unpleasant situation, I told him that Nicole was my fiancée. I hoped that would deter him, but all it did was create an eerie silence and a look that made me feel as if I had made a fatal mistake. That same night, as we were closing the store, the man reappeared. But this time, there was something deeply wrong with him. His eyes were wild, and he seemed on the verge of a breakdown. He started pounding on the glass doors, demanding to be let in. Nicole tried to calm him down, saying she wasn't interested, but it wasn't her he wanted. He was there for me, he shouted with a voice full of rage. If I get rid of her husband, she'll be mine. My blood ran cold. The threat was clear, he wanted to kill me. I told Nicole to run to the manager's office and call the police. While she did that, I stood there, staring at the man on the other side of the glass doors. He kept pounding on the doors, each hit harder than the last. The sound echoed through the empty store, and I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my body. At any moment, those doors could give way, and I'd be face to face with a man who was willing to do anything to eliminate me. Then Nicole came running back, holding a piece of wood, shouting that the police were on their way. The man hesitated. For a brief moment, it seemed like he was considering whether it was worth the risk. Finally, he turned and vanished into the night. When the police arrived, they reviewed the security footage. To our relief, they were able to locate him and arrest him. However, the trauma of that encounter stayed with us. Nicole and I decided it was time to move on, but the fear and tension of that night still haunt our memories. Although we went our separate ways, we remain friends, bonded by an experience we'll never forget. Starting a new job is already hard, but starting on the night shift at an isolated motel takes the difficulty to a whole new level. I worked from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and that night was my first shift alone. Nerves were present, trying to hide behind a facade of professionalism. The motel was simple, with large glass windows surrounding the office, allowing me to see the entire entrance. The security cameras were supposed to make me feel safe, but even so, I felt a slight chill down my spine every time I looked at those black and white screens. Everything was quiet until around 1 a.m. when a man walked through the glass door. At first glance, he seemed normal, asking about available rooms. But as I was checking him in, something about him started making me uncomfortable. His movements were erratic. He made abrupt gestures with his hands, as if swatting at something invisible around him, and at times, he made spitting noises into the air. The atmosphere grew heavy, but I did my best to ignore it. It was my job to serve him, and I just wanted to get it over with quickly. After he took the key and left, I waited for the relief to come, but it never did. Something was wrong. A few minutes later, the silence of the night was broken by loud banging on the glass door. My body froze for a second, and when I looked, there he was, standing there, staring at me with a vacant and disturbing look. He complained that he couldn't get into his room, accusing me of blocking his entry on purpose. I tried to stay calm, suggesting there might be an issue with the key, but something in his eyes made me feel a deep fear, like I was looking at someone about to do something unthinkable. My heart was racing, and before I knew it, I was running to the back office. I locked the door and grabbed a pocket knife I always carried for emergencies. With every passing second, I could hear the man shouting in the lobby. He was saying incoherent things, but what froze me inside was when I heard him mutter something like, "Kill her." Panic was suffocating me, but something kept me from calling the police. It was as if part of me was still trying to rationalize the situation. even when reason was screaming that something was terribly wrong. With a courage I don't know where I found, I decided to face the situation. I left the office trying to stay calm, with the pocket knife firmly hidden in my hand. When I got to the lobby, he was no longer there. The silence was oppressive. I found him in the bathroom, standing in front of the mirror, murmuring to himself, repeating that terrifying word, "Kill her!" My heart sank. The danger was real, but I needed to stay in control. I offered to escort him to his room, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. He accepted without saying a word. As we walked down the dark hallways, I noticed he was trying to open the wrong door. He was forcing his way into another guest's room. Panic gripped me. If he managed to get in, what could happen to the person sleeping inside? Completely unaware of what was about to unfold. With the pocket knife hidden and fear eating me up inside, I had to think fast to prevent a tragedy.